Jimmy, Kyle, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with the two of you today. For people who aren't familiar with you, would you mind filling in a little bit about who you are, all the incredible stuff you're doing in the high school strength and conditioning sport performance space that way?
So my name's Kyle Jacksic. I am the director of athletic performance at Charlotte Christian School. So we're in South Charlotte area. Super competitive kind of environment. Among that, that's my full-time position. I also work at X2 baseball up in Concord, North Carolina, and then help oversee performance initiatives for a national baseball organization called Performance Baseball. And then I run my own business here out of Charlotte as well. So we certainly keep ourselves pretty busy.
My name's Jimmy Gajewski. I'm the director of sports performance here at Lakewood High School. We're the first suburb just west of Cleveland, right on Lake Erie. This is my second year working with Lakewood City School District. Cover about 750 high school athletes and about 120 middle school athletes across 28 different sports. And outside of that, I have my own sports performance business, Gajewski Performance, where I do mostly online training and programming.
The two of you certainly stay busy, just like the majority of your high school athletes, I'm sure. It seems like now more than ever, the high school athlete has evolved, for lack of a better way to put it. When I played football in high school about 10 years ago now, really dating myself, a lot of the kids, they just kind of worked the farm or something like that over the summer, showed up for football, and they were already in great shape. We didn't really have a lot of the constantly doing one sport year round, I guess I'll say. We didn't really have a lot of these things now that seem so commonplace to me. And I think as a side effect of that as well, I don't remember when I was in high school, I don't remember the amount of injuries in other high school athletes that I saw that I saw practicing clinically just from an outpatient standpoint that way. It certainly seems like things are changing for the high school athlete, for lack of a better way to put it. I'd love to hear from the two of you just about general trends that you've seen in the high school athlete, because obviously there's all the kinds of stuff online, but a lot of the times this come from people who aren't in the trenches actually working with the athletes like you are that way. What kind of things have you seen in the high school athlete now that maybe were different than they used to be?
So I think there's a lack of general physical preparedness for a lot of them. If they're not able to work with a performance professional or like a consistent performance professional, at least from an early age, like boys and girls, by the time that they get to middle school, where Jimmy and I can possibly get them, if they're not with us, they're kind of like losing that piece because there's less and less play that's going on. Kids aren't jumping out of trees and, fooling around on a consistent basis. So I don't think there's a whole lot of body awareness being built, whether it's, lack of physical education at younger ages or just in kind of their home life because, video games and TikTok and being on their phones all day long. And then I think school stresses have also gone up too. We're a private school, so like I see it, and I see especially like our girls get broken down with the stresses of school, and then they have to give something up. And for a lot of the time, that's athletic development. I think in a post-COVID world, like I saw it, like I got catapulted into high school strength and conditioning during COVID, really. And what I saw was there's so many lost chains of, the classical motor development where, they can't skip, they can't run, they can't jump, they can't land because, they were locked up when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, locked up in their house and not being able to do. So that's definitely evolving that, there's a lot of different ways to do it. High school athletes are malleable in the grand scheme of things, but there's some limiting factors, at least from like base level, when an athlete's being presented to us.
I see an incredible amount of maladaptations from a shockingly early age, whether that is just sitting in class all day in a seated haunch position, that physical literacy or physical competency you were talking about. It's free play that I think most kids miss out on. So going through some rudimentary skips, rudimentary jumps, teaching them some very basic physical literacy components in our foundational program. I think that's where I focus my lens the most early on. And on the other side of that, I think I think there's some kids that are professionals and maybe are professionals a little too early. We see these like chronically in season kids. They'll go from a full season of basketball straight into AAU, or paired with JO volleyball year round. And again, there's just no opportunity for that general physical preparedness component that I'm really, again, just here to bolster for them.
It's really fascinating to me how we have, as you kind of outlined, two different camps, but both are lacking very similar things, right? They don't have general movement capabilities and capacities, if you will, but some of them are going from one sport to the next, where they should be developing these things but aren't. And others are specializing so early that they never really get the opportunity to develop any of these general qualities or characteristics that way. And I'm not really sure what the culprit of that is. Are we just missing it in recess and gym class, or is this something they should be doing on their own, but no longer are, as you related to the COVID pandemic and some of these other things that have happened in the past? But on the flip side as well, I think some of it that comes along with those detrimental things, if you will, is not just the physical, but the overall mental cognitive component of performance that we look at. We've talked about it over and over and over again with strength coaches on the podcast, how athletes are not at the same level of problem solving that they used to be. And you ask them to figure things out, and they just kind of pause and they don't really know where to begin. And that's a growing problem as well for me, because sport is constantly solving movement problems, right? How do I get around this defender? How do I hit the ball over the net into a location where the opposition is not located at so we can get a point, right? It's always solving some kind of problem. And the more creatively you can do that, the better of an athlete you're going to be, in my opinion. And I think somewhere along the lines, we're really missing that mark on the general physical quality standpoint. But by the same token, I'd imagine there's probably a growing amount of parent stress on guys like you who work with these athletes, because parents know all at the end of the day, and they want their kid to be benching 315, and they don't care how his skips look. They just care that he gets calls from the college and gets the offer letter, right?
I think you hit it right on the head. There's so much motivation externally, but a lot of that might not be intrinsic. You got to ask the kid, like, what do you want out of this? Do you want a D1 scholarship? Do you want to make a run at doing this professionally? And there's so much money involved on the private side of things too, that I think is a main driver. I think it's a multi-billion dollar issue we're talking about, but I always try to tell the kids and the parents, like, I'm free. If you're coming to Lakewood High School, like, you pay $0 to come train with me 2 to 4 times a week, 50 out of the 52 weeks out of the year, right? And it should be really a non-negotiable for you.
Yeah, I think there's a squeezing that's going on as well. So we're getting handed, as a freshman, probably a little bit more underdeveloped. And then we got to try to turn them into the possible dream of a Division I athlete in a couple years, because now obviously everything that's happening at the college level is impacting the high school level, the transfer portal and everything else. Like, the best athlete I've ever coached and had every single data point, if he was in high school when I was in high school, he would have had, 30 offers, and he got one. So there's the window is shortening, squeezing us as high school strength coaches, because we got to take a kid who may come in super underdeveloped and develop them into a college ready athlete in, possibly as quick as 2 years too. And kind of like go off of like Jimmy's point, like, it's a little bit different, like for us here, because we're at a private school in a super affluent area. I am quote unquote free as part of their tuition, but the parents can certainly decide to send their kid to whoever they feel is best. So building a program that, does those little things well, whether, it's data tracking, injury tracking, like all of that, like, I try to find as much correlation to be able to present in front of the parents that kids that come to our program are healthier, higher performing and everything else, compared to if they go, to Joe Schmo down the street. So there's a slippery slope on both sides of our mountain here, at least.
I think there's like a lot of cool in-house data and metrics and KPIs that I can show to the kids. But what's awesome for me is I can look back now at statistics. I've been here, a decent amount of time, and I could show the kids like, hey, through the entire season last year, we hit 14 home runs. And, we're 2/3 of the way through the year, and we've hit 16 as a team. And we had 70 stolen bases at a 91% success rate. And we're already at 66 this year at a 93. So all those vault steals and all those 30-yard flies and everything else we got going on, like, it's not just making you faster, it's making the team better, it's making you better as well.
First off, the impact that a good performance coach can have on athletes that way, because I think a lot of times now more than ever, strength coaches find themselves being asked, how much value do you provide? And what is the value of having you here and working with the team? And you just hit on it, Jimmy. It's like, look, we can make them faster, we can make them stronger, we can make them more powerful, and all of that can and will transfer to sport, not to mention the value that provides on them as a person for life, right? Starting to develop a very healthy relationship with the weight room, with this process of self-improvement. That could be a whole episode in itself right there. And the second thing that you both touched on that way was that concept of, hey, they've got me at the school, but there's this growing private training market. And that was something I noticed in a lot of different places, that we talk about the disconnect in sport between maybe school baseball coach and travel baseball coach, or school basketball coach and AAU basketball coach, and how that disconnect leads to higher workloads and all these other things that we think might relate to injury. But I've also seen that to a certain extent in the strength and conditioning or performance world, if you will, where we've got kids that are lifting at school 3, 4 days a week. But as you both mentioned, there's this growing pressure of, we need to get stronger faster and we need to be ready to perform at that next level. And somewhere along the line, we've equated more with better. So in addition to lifting 3 or 4 days a week at a public school or a private school with a strength coach, some of these kids that I had worked with in the past were also doing private sessions multiple days a week on top of that. And as a result, they're getting a minimum of 7 days a week in the weight room, or 7 sessions a week, I should say, in the weight room, sometimes twice a day. And I was just kind of left scratching my head, like, how do we fix this problem? Because before we even talk about things like program design and, the art of being a strength coach, if you will, I think some of it comes from sorting out the issue of, how do we get the kids to literally just commit to a program? Because at the end of the day, I don't think the program has to be perfect. I think they just need to do it consistently for a long time, and they'll find value in it.
Yeah, like I think there's, at least for us, where I think we're more involved with the parents than obviously like, the college strength coach or any college coach. So being visible to our parents, I think is important. And having those just open chain of communications. So even if they do decide, at least we are deciding those things together. So sometimes like I'll set up meetings with parents, or, shoot an email of just like, hey, like, Jimmy, talk to me about doing some like extra training. What's your thought process? Where do you live? And then trying to like, calculate where they're going. But really, like at the end of the day, like I think more and more high school coaches are having to turn more into, managers rather than anything else. Where, the AAU basketball schedule or the club volleyball schedule and everything else, like I'm constantly having to adapt my program to put the kid first. Like I can be gun ho of just, we're going to squat, bench, deadlift, try to increase those things. Sure. But if I can't keep the kid healthy, then no one's going to be happy. So a lot of the time it's, having an honest conversation with the athlete. Hopefully you've built enough of a ground to have those honest conversations, because I do think at least at the high school level, especially, strength coaches are kind of like the kids' best friends. Our kids are the most real with me on this campus compared to anybody else. So I can at least have that ground to have that honest conversation. They're just like, hey, I think you're doing too much, or hey, like we need to add these things in to keep ourselves healthy and everything else. So it's a little bit more of an art of the ebbs and flows of everything that's impacting us, because there is just so much. So you're turning much more into a manager, like a high performance manager rather than, just the strength and conditioning coach. And it's built differently at like every single school. Cause like, I'm a full-time faculty member, I'm an advisor, like we do most of our lifting and everything after school. Like there's a lot of different like confounding variables in the high school field. And then everyone does it differently. Like the way that Jimmy has it in Ohio compared to, a lot of the schools here in North Carolina is totally different, totally different. So there's a little bit more of an art to it at the end of the day too.
Yeah, I think if kids want to train, outside of these four walls, I'm going to do my best to try to communicate with whatever strength coach that they're working with at that time. It's always my preference, to have them here. It's just easier for me. Less phone calls I got to make, less meetings I got to sit in. If it's like I was talking about JO volleyball, I could walk down the hallway and knock on the volleyball coach's door, and say like, hey, what type of load were the kids experiencing during practice today? When that might take me, took 20 minutes, 30 minutes of phone calls to try to talk to a different strength coach or their travel volleyball coach. But at the end of the day, like grass is always greener where you're going to water it. So if you're going to water it here or you're going to water it 40 minutes away at a private training facility, like just be all in. Um, I think just one benefit to training here is there is no other strength coach. So, like if you're going to play soccer in the fall and then you're going to come play basketball horse in the winter and then baseball in the spring, like I'm the one guy that's got all the pieces to that puzzle, and I can figure out what's going to be the next thing coming for you. Um, but yeah, trying to just get kids in here with consistency and make myself available as much as I can. I know you guys are both workaholics. I like live here. I'm trying to be at everything, whether it's a team dinner, senior nights, game days. I eat lunch with these kids fourth and fifth period. They're coming in here playing hacky sack when their homework's done. Really trying to create a bond, like you were talking about, Kyle. Like I'm not making cuts. I'm not making decisions of who's starting, who's gonna play on the big Friday night under the lights game. Um, I'm just here to develop you. I'm here to watch you grow and try to support whatever goals you're trying to achieve. So I think we are in a very unique position where we can be mentors, but we can also be a little more, I guess, friendly than maybe the head ball coach could ever be.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. How do you take those pieces and take these different things and apply them to the many different athletes you work with? Because as you mentioned, you both work with 100 plus different athletes. You work with so many different sports, and the schedule is always changing that way. Kyle, I know you mentioned that a lot of times you just feel like a little bit of a manager, if you will. And I'd imagine you kind of sit there and plan things out and come up with a phenomenal program, and then probably half the time anyways, in the moment, you're like making tweaks and adjustments where it's like, hey, we're not going to do that much volume today, or this is going to get swapped with this, or whatever it is that way. I feel like the program design for the high school athlete, if you will, has to become a very kind of fluid thing, for lack of a better way to put it.
Like I think we try to have as much of a pulse. Jimmy talking about like he tries to be at everything. Like when I can get the time to just go out to practice, just to even have, like a little bit of a vibe check. Like if I know volleyball is coming in the weight room and they're down practicing, I'm gonna go down to that practice. Like, is coach happy? Is coach not happy? And then, from an emotional standpoint, they're gonna come in and be whatever they are, that post practice kind of like vibe. So having, a finger on the pulse of just, the balance of what's going on around us, I think that's at least a perk for us being on campus a lot is that, like sometimes a kid will come in to tell me something. I'm like, man, like I already know. There's like, how do you already know? I'm just like, I found that out like last night because we all communicate or like your friend will out you and like all of that. So there's definitely like more like management pieces on everything. But I think early on in my career, especially at the high school level, I was just like, I want everything to be perfect. I wanted to be, crossing T's, dotting I's, make sure our iPads look really good, like have all the data, like all of that. And then I quickly realized that like I'm gonna lose this job and lose myself really, really fast if this is what I care about. So I do think like there's just some honest conversations that you gotta have with yourself of just like, what is your purpose? Are you moving the needle like more forward? Like, I think, like I said, like time is getting squeezed, but you still do have like a lot of time to like, have that development piece, have that development of the relationship that like, sometimes a coach will text me and be like, hey, can I get 15 minutes of a recovery session at the end of practice today? Girls played like really, really hard. And you kind of like go to be like, no, like they really need to be in the weight room to get their squats in. And then you take a step back and you're just like, I would much rather build a relationship than worry about my X's and O's. So prioritizing, efforts and everything. And there's going to be times that, you're going to bow up and be like, no, like we can't do this. But like we're moving into the playoffs like right now, the hay's in the barn. Like the development chain of what we do this week and next week isn't really going to matter in the grand scheme of the next 4 years of the athletes' lives. And that might be cancelable at the end of the day, but that's kind of just like where like my mind goes, just having that honest conversation, taking a step back, which is like, what does the athlete and the team truly, truly need right now? More so mentally than ever physically.
I love, at the end of a block, I can look at a kid's Excel spreadsheet printed out on their paper and it's all filled out nice and neat. But just because I put something into Excel and printed it out 4 weeks ago doesn't mean that it has to happen, on that day. Like the ability to adapt and get creative, and create buy-in, like that's going to go a lot longer than if the kid got their, whatever lateral lunges or pick a lift that we got in that day.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of macro cycle planning going on in the high school strength and conditioning realm because something's going to get thrown off along the way for sure.
There's just too much chaos to try to control in here, and you know what? Like I almost into a point with some of these kids, like they're dudes, and they're gonna go on and be successful next year. If you don't want to do our, Hatfield box squat, like pick up a dumbbell. We could do that on the pitch chart, like a Zercher squat. Like pick a squat, and I try to empower them and give them a little bit of say in what they want to do. And 9 times out of 10, they're doing something that I view as harder and more physically taxing than the thing that I had programmed in the first place. So I'm like, all right, whatever. We got our squat in today.
And to that point, I think a lot of times people think that they have to go and put together, kind of like you mentioned, Kyle, the perfect program. Like everything has to be, exactly like 5-3-1 was originally wrote, or exactly like the French contrast method originally came out, right? It has to be by the book. And I think in reality, a lot of this becomes very abstract. It becomes very much just filling in the picture as you go sometimes. And I think one of the areas that I shifted my own framework on in relation to working with high school athletes from more of a rehab setting, if you will, is a lot of times these kids come in with some social media influences, right? They're like, well, I just saw this on the TikTok, or I saw this great exercise on Instagram. And they're like, can we try it? Can we try it? And for the longest time, I was against it because, at least for my own training, it is really freaking boring, right? I do pull ups 3 days a week. I've gotten good at pull ups, but it gets boring doing the same thing over and over and over again. And these kids you mentioned earlier are at an age where you can kind of get creative a little bit and gamify things and challenge things and incorporate new things into their training that actually provide some value and benefit. And I always kind of made the deal with them that 70-80% of our session was going to be structured, but you know what, we can take 10 minutes and you know what, yeah, let's have a play, let's make it a movement vocabulary component, if you will, and all of a sudden we're going to do all these crazy wild things. Yeah, sure, maybe they saw some of them on the Instagram, but if that's what it takes to get really good training in, and that's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel or the cookie afterwards as a reward, if you will, like I'm willing to make that transaction every single day now. And I think previously I was a little more closed off to that because I think some of the times we see these trendy things and we're just like, oh no, there's no way. But now I'm starting to see maybe there's actually some value in giving the kids the autonomy and letting them kind of have a say in their program or even design their own program in a way, kind of like you mentioned, Jimmy. It's like write down squat, write down deadlift, write down bench, write down press or something like that, and the kids just pick their own variations of it. And I think giving them that autonomy can go a long way in developing the relationship, which we talked about before, but also again setting them up for success lifelong in the weight room. They're not just being told what to do, but they're actually kind of learning different variations of movements and how to almost put the pieces together of their own program, if you will.
Yeah, I like my warm up lines real clean, real nice and orderly. Everything's on a whistle, 5 yard spacing. Um, but when I roll out the futsal nets, or when I roll out spike ball and take them into the wrestling room, or the dodgeballs and take them into the wrestling room, they are dripping sweat and they're screaming and yelling and competing, and they come and they bring that energy back in here, and we have like one of the best lifts of the month or one of the best lifts of the week. It always just changes the atmosphere when you let them compete and gamify some things.
Yeah, like I think there's so much that you can do because like I said like before, like a high school athlete's so malleable and like really any training dose that we're gonna give them is gonna help them like developmentally. That at some point you're just gonna have to choose the fun. Like I know Jimmy's got like deep level like experience and like I'm the same way and like we've coached at the college level like everything else like it's kind of like boring to me like now, like where it's just like when middle school football's in here at 6:30 in the morning, like one day, and you're just like, you know what, guys, we're just gonna try this. And you're just like I had them go from like Superman ISOs to like hollow hold ISOs today. They're just like, Coach, are we supposed to like actually like be able to like do this? And I'm just like, no, guys, that was like totally like a joke. Let's go to the weight room. But it's just like funny. Like it's just like there's trying to have like some like free play. I know like Mason, I think it was Mason Hayes put up an Instagram post of just not talking about over coaching. Like I'm much more laid back from a coaching standpoint that like I don't even want to coach every single rep and every single exercise all the time because I want the kids to learn how to fail or like learn how to adapt. Or if I try to overhaul that, I'm just going to knock them off. I'm going to lose them. Because if we're not having fun and at least having some level of freedom in our program, my kids aren't going to show up. Like they're gonna go down the street to Joe Schmo. So it's super interesting and like I enjoy coaching the high school level and middle school level because at some point you're just gonna probably just look at your piece of paper and you're just like, we're not doing this today, and you're just gonna throw it in the trash. And if you're honest with yourself, you're gonna be like, and it's gonna be okay. Like if I don't check that, barbell back squat box every single week, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, all right, like we're good. Like we're still moving in the right direction. And sometimes it's just, all right, guys, you're going to be my guinea pigs for me to figure out what I want to do with my private clients or something like that. You're going to be my guinea pigs. Let's see if this works. Let's see what the benefit is. And then if it like, oh, that exercise could actually be something. And then we just toss that into an accessory block for like our next phase and like everything else. So it's interesting, like, working with so many different people, how much it teaches you about other people. I gave a presentation in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, and then going to give the same presentation in New York this month, where I've learned more about professional athletes by coaching middle school kids than I would have ever thought. And I've learned more about, the vice versa of that too, where it's just like, all right, if a professional athlete can do it or can't do it, but a middle school athlete can, how can I get the professional athlete to do it? And everything else. So there's, it keeps stuff interesting. It keeps me engaged. Cause if we're only here, doing barbell lunges and hamstring curls and then sending them on their way, it gets real tedious and real boring real fast, and the kids are going to say that's boring. So my baseball guys are always like showing me an Instagram reel or a TikTok, and they're like, Coach, is this eyewash? Like that's literally like a saying like in our program, is this eyewash? And you're just like, yeah, I would think it's eyewash, but I'm gonna try it and maybe I'm gonna end up liking it. And I mean, there's plenty of eyewash out there too. But at least having the honest conversation, but then also educating them of just like, why is that eyewash? So that way, when they go on, whether they're playing college sports or not, they know how to be healthy and they know that you don't do bicep curls at the start of your workout when you're supposed to be doing trap bar deadlift or something. So that there's major education pieces of the skills of life that we try to bring to the table too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about like the trickle down or the trickle up. Like I think you see a lot of, you know, tech and metrics and KPIs come from a professional level and then trickle down to the college ranks and then kind of to where we're at in the youth level. But I was just reading an article. I wish I could remember the soccer academy, but it's essentially like a U16, 17, 18, and then the professional academy. I think it's on the West Coast, but they were starting to test trial some things with the youth level, and then it was trickling up to what their pro athletes were doing. And I started doing that with my own athletes. I'm the first guinea pig, and then the second guinea pig in the order is my middle school athletes. And if I really like something, I really like a game or a drill, then I'll bring it to the high school level. So I'm curious what you guys kind of do. Like, are you trying things out on yourself? When you do come across something new and inventive?
Like for me, because being a workaholic, there's like a lot of different like channels that I go through. So it usually starts with my own programming. And then I have a group of girls that some of them I've coached for as long as like 5 or 6 years. Some are now juniors in college, then my youngest are eighth graders. For the most part, those are usually my next round of guinea pigs, because they've at least had the longest experience, doing a lot of different things. Because I've been able to actually calculate everything in their program for a while, and they only come to me. And then from there, I put it with our baseball guys. Our baseball team's our most competitive team here, and then as well as the most bought into training and training hard and like everything else. And then I'm just like, okay, well, if the baseball guys can do it, then maybe we'll, start tossing this into some other programs too. But yeah, like I think I'm my own guinea pig first, definitely like for sure. I see stuff on Instagram, like I'll click save on Instagram, but then I never actually go back and like watch it. And then I end up fighting with myself because I'm just like, oh, I actually like want to like see that one from, the Miami volleyball strength coach or like something. And I'm just like trying to find it. I'm like, I can't find it. I can't find it. I can't find it. But yeah, it definitely starts with me first, but having those levels of guinea pigs too. And then, I mean, and then you're going to be like, that didn't work, or I don't like that. And then it's just like, the bad part is if I'm not good at it, then my kids probably aren't going to be good at it. But then if I'm not good at it, I'm not going to make myself look like an absolute doofus trying to show them the exercise too. So it's interesting now, like with an assistant, which she's the first in our school's history. Like sometimes I'm just like, you gotta show that exercise because I could not show that exercise.
Dude, I'm getting to that age. We just got TVs in here over spring break. I'm getting to that age where it's getting really hard for me to demo some of these plyos and Olympic lifts like cold at 6:15 in the morning. So I started a series where I'm just videotaping like 12 different exercises a day and I'm putting it up on YouTube and I'm playing it on the TV because I just don't have it in me anymore to do some of these things.
Do you guys have you hit the point where you have a good side? Because like for me, if it's a single leg exercise, especially a like pistol squat, I'm always demonstrating on my right side. The left side, we're getting there, but we never demonstrate on the left for some reason.
Yeah. Every single like plyo is my right. And then every like hip mobility exercise is my left. So now I'm just throwing myself into just adductor issues constantly. My right groin is absolutely torched compared to my left side.
Yeah, so I played soccer and baseball a lot when I was a kid, and I was a righty thrower and I was a righty kicker. So my left leg was always the plant, or even when I'm hitting a layup, like going up, taking off my left. So my left, anytime I'm jumping, I'm going off that left leg.
I realized we just kinda got through a phenomenal block around the programming component and that sort of thing that way, but we touched a little bit earlier on the injuries that exist in high school athletes, and at least when I was in Maryland, the amount of high school athletes I saw tearing their ACLs and tearing labrums and getting surgery in their hips and shoulders for labrum repairs and different things that way really blew my mind. And even in the baseball and overhead sports, the amount of elbow injuries, like, again, maybe it's just me, maybe it's all anecdotal. I just don't remember there being nearly that many when I played sports way back when that way. what is your role in the injury process at the school that way, when things start to come up that way? And also, like, what kind of trends have you seen in the high school population from an injury standpoint? Is it non-contact? Is it overuse? What kind of things are we seeing?
So for me, our in-house athletic training staff is through the Cleveland Clinic. Um, Last year we had a different athletic trainer. This year we got a first time a new college grad. Um, with last year's AT, I was doing some injury tracking, but I felt like new grad, first time job, it was a little too much to kind of coordinate that. So I don't have a ton of stats on what we're experiencing in high volumes, but I do know ACLs for our girls, patellofemoral pain for our explosive teenage boys, a lot of chronic low back pain. Those are I think are the big ones that I see the most. Um, what I have to explain that, I really think it goes back to just chronic overuse. Not a ton of exposure to a high variability of different movement patterns. And again, just the in season for way too gosh darn long. Like I think I was on the early end of what we see now with the early sports specialization. I played baseball 8 or 9 months out of the year as a middle schooler, throwing way too many pitches. I had my first uh, 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 shoulder injury, rotator cuff tear when I was in 6th grade. And I tore it again my freshman year. I tore my biceps because of, um, some complications from it. And I think me personally, like I'm a little overly protective of the kids because of that, because I knew it kind of steered me wrong, and kind of stymied some of my athletic development. So I never want to like push the envelope with these kids. If anything, I'm trying to like, if you're throwing all year, I'm trying to figure out a way, how do we throw like a weighted frisbee? Like, how do we undo whatever the movement is that we're currently doing right now?
Yeah, like, I think Jimmy hits the nail right on the head. Like, lack of high variability is probably the cause of most of our things. Same thing. We haven't had too many ACL tears. We've had probably more contact than non-contact. But a good amount of patellofemoral pain, a good amount of low back pain. We got like a little bit of like hip flexor stuff from like time to time, but I think that's probably just a loading and onloading problem. But we work alongside our ATs pretty hands-on. I'm kind of usually like a touch point between the physical therapist side and our athletic training side. And a lot of the time the ATs communicate with us really, really well of like, what a kid can and can't do. I come from a prehab, like, kind of background, like, I'm super passionate about that. I think if I could only do strength and conditioning, rehab-based stuff, that's honestly, like, what I would do because I just enjoy it so much. But definitely, like, the lack of high variability in our kids and, Jimmy brings it up, like, unwinding what the issues are, like, I try to look at every single sport and try to contrast exactly what they're doing. So, if it's volleyball who's jumping like a whole lot, like a lot of like foot contacts and everything else, I got to try to contrast that in our training. Baseball, working the decelerators in season, off season, and then building up maybe some of those things in the off season, and then, contrasting them in the in season, I think is important. Um, for us from a programming standpoint, we do team specific programming for at least our in-season teams. Baseball and football get specific programming year round, mostly because they're bought in and then they're training, like the amount of days that they train is unique compared to other programs. So I do think there is some merit of sport dictated programming, even for high school kids. Now, from program to program, it's probably 80% alike, but that like little bit of 20%, I do think that's probably across strength and conditioning, just like in general. Our accessory work should be impacted by the sport. So we try to balance all of those things um, throughout our programming and everything else to put ourselves in the best situation possible, and then hopefully limit injuries over time, especially from an overuse standpoint. Because I do think probably more injuries for us are chronic rather than acute.
I think that's phenomenal, giving them the opposite of what they're getting. It's funny, there was a baseball team I was talking with about hamstring injuries, and the team, their conditioning was running the bases over and over and over again. And I go, have you ever had them run the other direction around the bases? And all of a sudden the light bulb clicked, like, oh, maybe we need to go the other way. And it's amazing how small changes like that, giving them the opposite, can really make a difference on some of those injury things. And I think another component to that as well is, you both mentioned like chronic back pain is becoming an issue in the high school athlete. And it's like, some of these kids, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and we've already had back pain for 12 months or more. Like, I think the earlier we can break the cycle of that, the better they're going to be long term. And I think doing that through a lot of education and understanding, and less of the ultrasound, hot pack, ice pack kind of stuff coming from a physical therapist. I think the more we focus on getting them to feel good through education, empowerment, and so on, that way, the better they're going to be to kind of, prevent that from becoming a lifelong issue as we've seen for others, unfortunately. I think the last component I want to mention on this injury piece is a lot of these kids are very, very fearful of injury, especially if they just saw a friend get injured, or if this is their first time ever really experiencing injury or pain that way. Like, I'm sure you pick any of the three of us, and you can get stories for days about, oh, blew my back out deadlifting, threw it out the other day, no big deal, just happens sometimes. But the first time you do it, you kind of pause and kind of takes your breath away, like, what just happened? Like, am I okay? And I think that's the reality for these kids. When they get hurt, like, this is the first time they've likely been injured. This is a whole new thing that they have to navigate. And on one hand, they're made of rubber and magic at their age. Sometimes they bounce back from stuff and we have no explanation for how. But on the other hand, some of them are facing very serious injuries that take quite some time to get back. And I think the more we can educate them around that, empower them around that, but also if they are unfortunate enough to get injured, get them in working with people like you shortly afterwards, right? One of my big things I always like to do after someone had a lower extremity injury is get them into some kind of strength and conditioning sessions with other coaches where they could at least work upper body and be a part of the team. Or, hey, maybe they're at the point where they can bike. So, hey, can they do some assault bike conditioning with their strength coaches? So they're still there, they're still around their peers and engaging instead of feeling like they're isolated because their injury that way. And I think the more we kind of shift towards that, rising tides raise all ships, and finding ways to work together in the best interest of the athlete, the better they're going to do regardless of what the injury is.
Yeah. Um, I do think there's a risk to every single thing that you do. And I do think having that conversation on the front end is important. It was in my presentation last month, in the presentation I'm giving in like a couple weeks, like every exercise, every loading choice, but every omission carries consequence. So yes, we try to be as like calculated as possible, but there's going to be like injury is inevitable at the end of the day. If you're playing a sport, guess what? You're risking that to happen. So hopefully you have a relationship that like at least gives you the balance that if the kid is scared, then you can get them out of being scared to put them in the best situation moving forward.
Yeah, I think, you know, everything we do in here is vertical integration from like a programming standpoint. And to kind of give the kid a little bit of confidence, we'll just start putting everything, instead of on a percentage base, I'll just put you on an RPE or an RIR scale. And then that way it's a temperature controlled climate. We hand select the exercises, we hand select the weights. Like it couldn't be more empowering for that individual, and more confidence building. But once I think we rotate out of the weight room and start getting them back into practice, I think that's where it gets a little more tricky for me, because I control less out on the court or on the field than that athlete does, or that coach does. But just trying to instill a little confidence in the kid early on, trying to make them feel less ostracized, like you said, get them back in the weight room and out of the training room. back with their teammates, back on a regular schedule. The mental side of it all, like, it can be a very depressing experience going through something like that. You're away from your team, you're away from what you love. A lot of these kids, athletics and sport is their identity. And that's some conversations I have even before a kid gets injured. Like, part of the recovery process is trying to reduce stress. Like, what brings you joy? What brings you happiness outside of athletics? For me, I tell them it's getting out in nature. You know, I'm a strength coach at heart, but I communicate and see people every single hour of every single day. I need some time to myself. That's usually done in the metro parks or in Lake Erie or something else. Like, trying to just have some honest conversations with the kids and see what I can do less of, honestly, in here sometimes.
And I realize we could probably talk about this all day long and still just scratch the surface, because this is a very deep topic, for lack of a better way to put it that way. Is there anything we missed or didn't get to discuss today that y'all wanted to bring up?
I want to know more about Kyle's baseball team. As soon as I heard we're doing a podcast together, man, I've been a huge fan. I'm rooting for you boys. You got to kill it right now.
States next week. States next week. But yeah, Jimmy's like, not to be full of myself, but Jimmy's just like, oh yeah, we hit 16 home runs, and I'm looking at our stats, and we're just like, we're 35 home runs in 29 games. But I mean,
How many games you play?
we got some dudes.
Oh,
we
yeah.
got some dudes. So it's super interesting. But you know, we talked about, you know, hand on the pulse. You know, our baseball throwing program comes from me. Our warm up comes from me. Our lifting program comes from me. All of our recovery days comes from me. So, you know, having your finger on that pulse is really important. So if you can do it, just go all in. But yeah, I will unfortunately be missing, hopefully, them in the state title game. And might have to shave my beard if they win it, and I'll have to shave it in New York and not in Charlotte, North Carolina.
For people who want to find out more about the two of you online that way and keep up to date with y'all, where can they find you at?
So my Instagram is probably the best pulse for me. It's at Kyle Jacksic, so KyleJacksic, and that will kind of link you to all the other stuff that I'm involved in. Try to post as much video content and, you know, coaching education as possible. Outside of that, if you find yourself in Charlotte, swing on by. No matter where I'm at, you may see me in a couple different settings, but my door is always open.
I might burn some gas and come visit you guys sometime. But I am on Instagram at Jimmy Gajewski, JIMMYGAJEWSKI. Dan, feel free to put my Instagram handle or my Lakewood City Schools email. I think Instagram DMs is probably the best way to contact me. I'm trying to get better about posting. I'm not social media savvy, but you know, I try to highlight the hard work the kids are doing in here. So getting a little bit better with the educational stuff.
For sure, we'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and keep up to date with Jimmy and Kyle. This was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time and insights.
Yep. Y'all have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck to you guys.